What is it time for right now? I don't mean listening to Barney's daily devotional with Joe. That's obviously a good time for that. But I mean, what is the time that we live in? Jesus has not returned yet. We've been called into his kingdom. We've got life. What do we do with it? What is the time for? Jesus, as he finishes answering the man's question, remember back at the start of Luke chapter 12, a man came and demanded that Jesus intervene in his family dispute. He said, my brother's holding out on me. I want him to divide the inheritance with me. Though I don't deserve it, I want my share. And he makes his demand, and Jesus has been answering that for a very long chapter now, a very long speech in reply, mentioning greed, talking about contentment and trusting God. He's talked about being ready for God's kingdom and being ready for the master to return and making sure we're not abusing others. But he's also mentioned that there's going to be family division. Not that he's intending his followers to be divided and to be aggressive, but it will happen. There will be these family moments and divisions. And I didn't mention yesterday, but the family division that this man currently finds himself in may well have that following Jesus as part of the cause. Maybe that's why the brother is not giving the inheritance to his sibling. Jesus is involved in it. And perhaps that's exactly why this family are so messed up, and this man's demanding the inheritance from his brother. He's come to Jesus. He obviously loves Jesus, and he thinks Jesus should help as he's one of his servants. But Jesus is not going to get involved. In fact, as he rounds it out, let's hear the end of the discussion, because he turns it back to family matters. And so we're in Luke chapter 12 and verse 54. He said to the crowd, when you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately you say it's going to rain, and it does. And when the south wind blows, you say it's going to be hot, and it is. Hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky. How is it you don't know how to interpret this present time? Why don't you judge for yourselves what is right? As you are going with your adversary to the magistrate, try hard to be reconciled to him on the way, or he may drag you off to the judge, and the judge turn you over to the officer, and the officer throw you into prison. I tell you, will not get out until you've paid the last penny. Wow, it's another harsh reality that Jesus is speaking about. But what he's saying is, what is the time for? Well, you've got to understand it. What are the signs? We are in this moment. You can understand how to prepare for rain when you see the clouds off in the distance. You can understand how to prepare for a heat wave and what you need to get ready. The rainy day, when that's coming, that's not a time for the washing. It might be the time to plant some new seedlings though. And likewise, the dry time, well, it's time to store up the water and to conserve. Why is Jesus saying that? Because he wants us to be wise about the time we live in. The time we live in is one where division will come amongst families. That is undoubted, because Jesus is demanding our loyalty. He is the master, and to be his servant may well bring difficulty. Not that we should be causing them. We are not to be haters. We are not to be the provokers. We are there as servants of Jesus, but that loyalty is going to bring conflict. We've got to recognize that. But in the end, he says it's a time to try and make peace if you can. And so this dispute with the man and his brother, he says, look, as you're going down to the judge to sort it out, rather than going to law, try and be at peace. As much as it's up to you, as much as it's up to a Christian, be at peace with those around you. That's what Jesus is calling for. This is a time to love people. It's a time not to create undue problems and fights that don't need to be had. It's okay to be wronged. It's okay not to get every last thing that you deserve. We're not to stand on our rights. And it may be partly because you go to the judge and you don't know how they're going to find. It may be that it all goes horribly wrong. Even if you're within your rights, you may end up being the one who suffers. And so there's an element of self-preservation in it, but even more, it's about harmony. Yes, following Jesus will bring problems, But we are to be people of peace. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Even though division comes when we follow him, we are not to be the cause of that. Jesus is causing us to be lovers, and he's telling us to be at peace with those around us. And if we are wronged, well, so be it. Particularly if it's another Christian. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul talks specifically about the church there is really messed up. They've got all sorts of disputes and problems. But one thing that they're doing is all suing each other. They feel like they've been slighted, bang, we go to court. That is not the way it's to be. Jesus is giving the way forward. As you're on your way to court, this is a time for harmony. What we are about is gospel love. Jesus is coming back. That is the thing that matters more than anything. That's the thing to be ready for. That is when we should be found serving, willing, ready for him, caring for those around us, not abusing our power, not trying to get things for selfish means. We've seen his warnings against that in the hard stories he's told. We are to be servants of our Master, loving as he loved, sharing his good things, sharing his gospel, being generous with those around us. It's been a great challenge. This man's question provoked a whole lot of things to think through, didn't it? At the start of Luke 12. But Jesus is clear. We are to put Jesus in his kingdom first. Everything else is to fall into place. People of peace who go with the gospel, who want Jesus to be honoured. Let's pray. Father, these are challenging words yet again. As Jesus dealt with this man, help us to learn the lessons that we are to be people of peace. Help us when there is family conflict, and even when we don't get the things that we deserve, not to be fighters, not to be angry, but to be gentle. Help us to know that our Master is coming, that our treasure is in heaven, and we don't need to get everything we can out of this world. For this world is passing away. Help us to look forward to that kingdom and to serve you with joy now. Help us to love those around us, to be bold in the proclamation of our faith, that we might help others to share in this great joy of being yours. But Father, again, help us to be wise that this won't always be easy for us, and help us to take the comfort that you know what you're talking about, and that you are the great model for us of being bold and courageous, and yet being a man of peace. And Father, please help us to respond as you would in all these situations. Where we are in dispute and in bitterness with some other believer or family member, Father, help us to be calm, and help us if it's within our means, to be reconciled to those around us. For Jesus' sake, for his glory. Amen.